Okay, quick video today because the Labour Party have decided that they're going to lower the voting age by the time of the next general election to 16. And I don't know about you, but when I was 16, I definitely should not have been voting. Look, in my life, I went on to study at the University of Cambridge, I won a scholarship, I joined the army, I was an officer, I went through Sandhurst, and I say all of that not just to brag pointlessly, but to show you that I've done okay. But do you know what I was doing at 16? I dropped out of school for a year. In fact, I was convinced that I was going to become a professional Call of Duty player. Yeah, I've never spoken about that on the channel because, well, first of all, there was no reason to, it was never relevant, but secondly, it's kind of embarrassing and a bit cringeworthy, right? And if I'm honest, the reasons for me dropping out of school are actually a bit more complicated than simply wanting to be a professional Call of Duty player, but I'm just not going to give you my full life story, not in this video anyway. I bring it up to illustrate a point, right? There are a lot of people who will go on to do amazing things in this country that if you went back and looked at their 16-year-old selves, you would be like, wow, I can't believe that that is the same person. This 16-year-old definitely should not be allowed to vote, even though I know in my head they're going to go on and do these amazing things. And so I'm looking at this from my own personal experience and personal perspective and thinking, what on earth is going on? I think in that age range, like 15, 16, 17, different people mature at different rates. They grow up very, very quickly and your mindset changes rapidly. And that's clear in the example of me, right? When I just turned 16, clearly I wasn't very mature. I dropped out of school in my first year of A-levels, not good, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward a year, I put myself back in college. I'm focused, I'm studying, I know what I want to achieve and I'm going to do it. I end up getting full marks in most of my exams. That is a completely different person in the space of a year. And that's how much people are changing in that age range. So when I look back at it, I don't understand how you can give those people the vote. It just doesn't compute to me. So what then is Labour's justification?
I think it's really important that 16 and 17-year-olds have the vote because they're old enough to go out to work, they're old enough to pay taxes, so to pay in. And I think if you pay in, you should have the opportunity to say what you want your money spent on.
So Keir Starmer's logic seems to be that because they could pay income tax, they therefore should be eligible to vote. And that might sound reasonable at first, but I'm going to give you a few reasons why that is just completely wrong and insane. First of all, how many 16 and 17-year-olds do you know that actually earn enough money to pay income tax? Because for me, it's none. I mean, it doesn't help that I don't know any 16 or 17-year-olds, but I imagine that 99% of them are not paying income tax. If you really wanted to make it the rule that people who pay income tax are therefore eligible to vote, then do that. They show up at the voting booths with their payslip that proves that they've been paying income tax or national insurance, and then they can vote. So why don't you do that instead? Another point, there are a lot of people who don't pay taxes, that don't pay income tax, and we do allow them to vote, right? So think about it, you know, if you're on disability benefits or whatever, you can still vote even though you're not paying any taxes. So paying taxes being the bar for deciding whether or not someone can vote doesn't quite seem right, does it? Secondly, there are a lot of things that we don't allow 16-year-olds to do. We don't allow them to drink, to smoke, to drive, to gamble. We don't trust them to make any of those decisions. Some of them are physically harmful, so I'm not saying I don't support those rules, but the point is, you don't allow them to do any of those things, but you now want me to believe that they are smart enough and aware of the world enough to make voting decisions about the future of the country. And I just don't buy that. Let me pick up on one of those very specific examples, gambling. Now, I think gambling is actually really quite bad for the most part. I think people get hooked on it and it ruins their lives. I'm not defending gambling here. But in the context of this argument, what you are now telling me is that people who are 16 are presumably barred from gambling because they're so susceptible to making poor life choices that you don't trust them to go and buy a lottery ticket. And yet you want me to believe that even though they're that susceptible to making poor life choices, they should be allowed to vote. You're telling me that they're old enough to earn money, but they're just not old enough to work out how they spend it for themselves, i.e. going to a betting shop. It just all doesn't make any sense, right? So what's the real reason? Why are Labour doing this? Well, they're gerrymandering. And for those who don't know what gerrymandering is, it's very, very bad. It's where you rig the rules of an election or you rig the demography of a population to ensure that you can win the election. not by convincing the people who already exist and can vote that you are the best person, but by changing who can vote or who is in the country. And that's really bad. Now, Labour would completely deny that, and of course they would, because it's super illegal and really, really terrible to do. But just because they would deny it doesn't mean that's not what's actually happening here. Labour have effectively made the gamble that people 16 and 17 will mostly vote for the Labour Party. And they might not be wrong. Maybe you're a lifetime Labour supporter or a big Keir Starmer fan, and you think I'm being way too cynical about this whole thing. After all, the Labour Party won this stonking majority at the last general election. Why would they have to resort to tactics like this? And to get the answer to that question, you only have to go and look at the polls, because right now Labour are polling at somewhere between 15 and 20%. Not good. That's in the region of the Tories, right? So what it took the Tories 14 years to do, effectively destroy their own party, well, it's taken Labour 1 year. They're losing votes to the Reform Party, but also to Jeremy Corbyn's new party. So yeah, desperate times for the Labour Party. And you know what happens in desperate times? Desperate measures. There's a couple of other things I want to mention when it comes to this story, because ITV News actually went out and did a poll of 500 16 and 17-year-olds, and guess what? 50% of them don't even want the vote. So the Labour Party is trying to speak to this younger crowd saying, hey, we're going to give you the vote. And the people that they're appealing to are like, well, we don't really want it. It's paradoxical in a way. They are sensible enough to realise that this is a terrible idea. Or alternatively, you have to say, well, it is a really good idea. They're just too stupid to understand that. Well, if they're too stupid to understand that, don't give them the goddamn vote. Very, very strange situation, right? And it's not the only thing. It turns out that the Labour Party have also made some other changes. They've decided that instead of traditional voter ID, like your passport and your driving licence, you can now use your bank card. Why is that?
Now, the government are saying that there are three things that they are focusing on when it comes to these election reforms. First of all, that age change, of course. Second of all, they are going to allow bank cards to be able to be used as voter ID. Remember, the Conservatives brought in voter ID. People had to have very specific forms of ID in order to vote. And if you didn't, you were no longer allowed, even if you were registered to vote. Well, they are changing that so you can also now use your bank cards.
Now, I am truly going to finish this video on a really cynical note, and that is, I think the reason the Labour Party have chosen to start pushing this news story today is because they don't want you to focus on the Afghan scandal that came out 2 days ago. I think that is one of the biggest scandals ever to hit British politics, and they really don't want you talking about it. So they've thrown out what they call red meat to the media and to you, so that you have something else to focus on, complain about, talk about, discuss. Anything other than you talking about the Afghan scandal. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please do go and watch the last video on my channel. Maybe I'll put a little clip in towards the end of this video. I think that's one of the biggest stories, and that should be all that is in the news for the next 2 months. Honestly, it is absolutely insane, the level of cover-up that we now know took place there. Bonkers. Really, really bonkers stuff. Some people are going to come back and say, well, this was in the Labour Party manifesto. Okay, sure. But the decision to start pushing this today, 2 days after that major story broke, yeah, I just don't think that's natural at all. Anyway, please do let me know what you think. As always, I will try and reply to a couple of hundred comments. That's what I always do. I can't reply to them all. Like the last video got 1,000 comments. The one before got like 2,000. I just can't reply to them all. I do my best to try and reply to a couple of hundred every video, and then hopefully over time, you know, I'll get to speak to everyone and hear everyone's viewpoints on at least a few different topics. I really do value having your opinions, by the way, and even if it's just not an opinion but your support on the channel, that's awesome too. Occasionally I do get people telling me, hey, this is really boring, and it's like, okay, sorry. But yeah, for the most part, really supportive, and I'm really appreciative of all of you who come back, watch more videos. Yeah, really, really fills my heart, I suppose. Anyway, I'll see you in a future video. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're not already. That'd be fantastic. Hit the bell icon, and yeah, in a future video.